Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Tuesday, not Monday, September 3rd, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. Please note at 4:30 this evening, a new board member orientation took place in the district office conference room. I'd like to recognize and welcome all those in the audience this evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jacob, would you be willing to read the school board norms this evening?
Of course. The board-developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached. Execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, commit to assessing board effectiveness, and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Jacob. Moving on in our agenda, we don't have anything under public communication. Under conflicts of interest, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? If not, moving on to our consent agenda. At any time, a board member can pull an item off a consent agenda. It does not need a second. Would a board member like anything removed? If not, is there a motion to approve? Motion by Steve. Is there a second? Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving into our regular meeting, we don't have recognition tonight under correspondence. Please note that we have all received an invite to the 2024 Jamestown High School Hall of Fame banquet on Thursday, September 26, 2024. Nothing under reports. Under board education, number 1, strategic competency, measure 4 overview. Dr. Luck.
Thank you. You do have a written report there for me. The board education is represented in board memo 108. My intention here is to kick off a series of 5 different opportunities to talk about measure 4, probably one of the most significant measures in terms of impact to public education. And so it is designed as an education tool. You'll see that represented in this presentation, not only to educate the board, but to educate staff that might be listening, to educate the community around initiated measure 4. So when people go to those ballots in November, that they understand well what it is that they're being asked to vote on. And can be, like I said, educated at the ballot box. So that is my intention. This initial board education, or this initial presentation will be in board education. The next 4 will be just a part of the board report that I will bring up and discuss and allow for questions. So this is an overview, and I looked at it as, what does the measure say? I think over time, since this has been brought forward, there has been a little bit of confusion as to what the measure does and what it doesn't do, what it would do, what are the implications of doing that, and I, again, want us to be educated as a district on what it says and what it doesn't say. Future superintendent reports are going to include, because this does deal significantly with property tax, September 16th will provide additional information on the role of property tax. That also fits pretty well with our budget hearing conversation that we will have on the 18th. Potential impacts of the elimination of property tax on October 7th. Alternatives to property tax on the 21st. And then the potential impact on the measure to the community on November 4th. So with that, I have included the full text of the measure is linked in that memo, so if you wanted to dig into the specifics of Measure 4 and what's written, but I've also summarized that measure for you, and for those that are listening. It is initiated like any constitutional measure, initiated measure. It's initiated by the citizens of North Dakota. The intent is to seek to eliminate property tax by amending sections of the North Dakota Constitution. So, the question becomes, if approved, what would happen with the measure? And this is where I think there comes confusion as far as, sometimes you hear different sides say different things. And I think it's important that we understand what is specifically stated. So if approved, the measure would prohibit political subdivisions like school districts from levying taxes on real and personal property. An exception to that is paying off existing debt. So if a district has passed a referendum in the last couple of years, you'd still have the ability to utilize property tax to continue to pay off that debt. It's already been voted on by the community, so that logic follows. So if you've had prior approval for that bonded debt, you'd be able to continue to pay that off. By this measure, if approved, the legislature would be responsible to provide replacement payments to those districts, or those political subs. So if a sub had been levying for operations in the past, it would be the legislature's responsibility to determine how that would be done, and if that's using, say, for example, the legacy fund to make those payments, or fee assessment, giving political subs the ability to create their separate fee structures. How that would be done is not explicitly stated in the measure. It simply states that it is the legislature's responsibility to fill those buckets. If those buckets were filled by property taxes in the past, now it's the legislature's job to determine how those buckets are filled moving forward. And the floor for that is 2024 property taxes. So the decisions that political subs make in 2024, if this measure were approved, would outline what your floor is moving forward. That is how that is established. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about, what proponents say and what opponents say. One last thing, the measure would establish limits on the amount of debt that local governments could incur, and it would restrict those governments from issuing new GO bonds, so new general obligation bonds, secured by property taxes after January 1st of 2025. So in a nutshell, that is what is stated in the full text of Measure 4. So what would that cost? Is the next question. And I bring that up because there are different perspectives on this. There's different numbers. If you ask the state legislature, they would say 3.15. That's what Legislative Council determined to be the cost, is 3.15 billion. That is the size of the bucket that the state would need, or legislators would need to refill to maintain 2024 levels. If you ask the writers of or proponents of the measure, they would say they believe it's 2.32 billion. But regardless of the amount, even though that's a pretty significant amount difference, but regardless of that amount, like I said earlier, it would be the government's responsibility to decide how is that bucket then refilled. Is it legacy fund? Are you using existing funding structures that you have? Is it new fees that would be established to allow organizations, political subdivisions, I should say, to pass those costs along to individual users? That is yet to be determined, but that is how it would work. So regardless if the number is 2.32 billion or 3.15 billion over a 2-year cycle, it would be somebody else's responsibility. That is not defined in the measure. So I included, to give I think a good look at what this actually states. I spent a little time and looked through different resources and trying to analyze what is the perspective of those that are proponents of Measure 4, and then those that are opponents also try to summarize what their perspective is. So I've included that here. From a proponent, and I hope I'm speaking adequately on all of this, but proponents of the measure, kind of the root of the measure to them is that property tax is an inequitable system, and that there would be a significant benefit to property owners and to the community and to the state by the elimination of property tax by providing significant tax relief or financial relief to property owners, which would then turn around, and to businesses and others. But there would be a result of that. The state becomes more attractive because of that changed system. There would be spurred economic growth in North Dakota, and that there would be a hold harmless, because you are basing whatever those payments are, even though they're not defined. The proponents would say you're still giving that at the minimum level of 2024. So you have a hold harmless, or what I would call a hold harmless, for taxing entities. The proponents also say that they believe the state's existing financial reserves are sufficient to replace this lost revenue, and from the resources I looked at, wanted to definitively state that they didn't believe that essential services would be jeopardized in any way. So questions on where the proponent side?
Yep.
Jason.
The 2024 floor, and this may be later on, but that's not forever. I'm assuming that maybe each biennium there'd be a new floor set, or is that not determined yet?
That would be the legislature's responsibility by the measure. It is stating that 2024 is the starting place, but it would be required by the legislature to determine what changes from 2024. So it is a floor that has potential to have a increase, but it wouldn't be determined by the people in making those specific, that have those specific needs. You'd be beholden to others to make that determination for you. The other, go ahead.
It's more of a parliamentary type of question here. So this is a change to the Constitution. There would need then to be a follow-up from the legislature to implement this through changes in century code then, correct?
Correct. There would be significant amount of change needed to implement such a measure. Those other systems would need to be determined because they aren't identified. It just says that somebody else is going to do, or this will be changed. It doesn't give a specific path. So others would be required to do that. Our legislature meets for 90 days every other year. I would imagine that there would have to be significant amount of discussion and century code change that would go into determining what, how much, and how would that work.
Any other questions? Okay.
So from an opponent standpoint, you can find that is a fairly organized group. I provided a link to that rather than list everybody that's in that. There's really a large number of different individuals and entities, organizations, and they have organized this Keep It Local. They have expressed pretty significant concerns about the consequences of replacing a stable revenue stream, which is, they're considering property taxes to be the most stable stream, with an unvetted and ambiguous revenue, meaning just what I'd said earlier, that there is not a plan for how would these be replaced. It would be somebody else's role to determine what that would be. And opponents would suggest that's hard to vote on that when there isn't a plan. Another fear is related to Jason's question, which is setting at the 2024 levels, and do those funds then meet future needs? While they could be increased, and while pathways could be increased, that is uncertain, and so that lack of certainty is also concerning to opponents. Also associated with that, if you look at the 2024 levels, really what ends up happening from an opponent perspective is that you reward those political subs that have taxed the highest, and you may penalize those that are being the most efficient with their tax requests. If everything is based on 2024, really what political subs should do right now in preparation for this measure would be to tax as high as you can, because the longest term benefit then comes from the highest level of taxation. And I'm not suggesting that that happened, but I'm just saying that that's what, from an opponent perspective, that would ensure the highest levels of funding to take place. And of course, I would hope that everybody would be stewards to tax dollars, but that would be the system that would be in place. As you could probably tell by the name Keep It Local, there's also then concern that the erosion of local control. As all decisions, as funding decisions come from others, less control and less authority is given then to those that are making local decisions. And so what would happen in that? And that's where the concern of essential services being provided. If you can't react nimbly at a local level, it becomes harder, or if that funding isn't established and directed at that local level, it's then very hard to be reactive to the local needs. And that's what opponents would suggest. And there was also concern specifically about inefficiencies and inequities, and a particular concern would then be between urban and rural areas. So that is an overview of the measure and the perspectives of both sides, and I would stand for any other questions.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
Generic, do these measures require 60% vote or at the poll?
That's just a majority.
Just a simple majority? Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Any other comments, Dr. Luck? Okay.
No, just that we'll have a little bit more in depth. The other thing I would say is if there are questions that come, whether that's somebody listening in or board members sitting around the table, if you have other questions, send them my way and I will answer them as part of my superintendent report. And then we can all learn from having that dialogue together.
Very good. Moving on in our agenda, we have the strategic plan progress monitoring, Mr. Gaylor and then Dr. Leck also. Strategic focus 3, engagement and learning, goal 1. Strategic focus 4, growth and learning, goal 1.
So what we decided to do, you'll hear from both of us. I will focus on the engagement and learning goal. Mr. Gaylor is going to focus on growth and learning, although we may add some color and perspective from each other as we present. We decided to do two progress monitoring goals on this meeting because we know that we're going to have a longer meeting next time with our budget hearing. And that's going to fuse in together with some of our board education too. But we felt that this would be maximize efficiency here for the board as well. And both of these we feel like we can do at this time. This is just an overall of what engagement of learning means. I won't read it to you or to the public, but this is how we define engagement of learning. The specific goal for goal 1 has to do with student engagement. As I shared with the board when we adopted the annual revised plan, we re-looked at how we were defining engagement. There's an assessment that categorizes students into 3 different areas: committed, compliant, and disengaged. When we did this initially, our focus was on combining committed and compliant students, and in that we fared very well comparatively to the state, and we were at a very high level in terms of getting students, most of our students, a significant portion in the 90th percentile in every level almost, at what we considered engaged. But as we looked more deeply, we felt we were not being aspirational enough in looking at compliant wasn't a standard that we wanted to hold. Just doing it because it was supposed to be done shouldn't be our goal. And so we wanted to look at that highest level, so only in committed. So that changed these factors a little bit. So in overall committed, our goal was 50% or higher. Then in subcategories, behaviorally, emotionally, and cognitively committed, we set standards for each of those. And we also created a sub-goal for the number of students that are disengaged, so not engaged at all. So as you look at our overall numbers, a few things stick out. One is that, we're on par, we're fairly comparative to where the state is at, and that's a nice barometer, that's a nice help for us to see where we are, but that's not our goal. Our goal shouldn't be, as the board has stated in the past, our goal shouldn't be just to simply be where the state is at or a little bit above the state. That gives us a nice check along the way, but we want more than that. And so you'll see we're at 42%, which is fairly consistent with what's happening across the state, but it is not at our goal of 50% of where we want to be. And if anybody wants to look at how we find these metrics, you can find them on ND Insights. It's a website that gives a lot of great data. If the board hasn't spent a ton of time on that, I would encourage you to do so. If the public hasn't looked at ND Insights, I would encourage you to do that as well. But that's where this data is reported. All of this is a year in the past, so we do this assessment this year, and so what you're looking at is the finalized reporting. Actually, it hasn't even been finalized completely yet and reported yet at the state level, but we have access to that, and so we're sharing what we know as of now. It's not final, but it's pretty close. There wouldn't be significant change from these numbers. So we are not there. We are not at our goal of where we want to be. We are at 42%, and our goal is to be at 50%. So we're not there overall. If you look at subgroups, behaviorally committed, we are very, very close. So 49%, and our goal is 50%, based on our data from this most recent school year. So we're getting close on behaviorally committed. Cognitive commitment, again, while we are close to where we are right at the state levels, we aren't close yet to where we want to be on cognitive commitment. We have 38% of students, and our goal is to be at 50%. 45%, sorry. So I have an error in there, so I'm going to have to go back to those. Emotional commitment, our goal is 39%. Or we are at 39%, our goal is 45%. Sorry, again, I'll have to fix that. But we are a shade below where the state is at, but we are underperforming in terms of what we want our goal to be. Again, that highest level of commitment. We do very well if you combine the compliant and the committed, but not where our intention is to be. When you look at disengaged, you see a pretty stagnant trend across the last few years. Between 13 and 14% of students that disengaged that report out as being disengaged with a goal of 10%. Again, not where we want to be. And unlike some of the other areas, which I'll show in a bit, this is a fairly stagnant number. While that follows the trend lines of the state, we know that we want more than that, and our goal is to be at no more than 10%. So that range, that stagnant range of 13 to 14% really isn't where we want to be, and if you disaggregate that data a little bit more, you see that highest level of disengagement falls in the students that are categorized as emotionally disengaged. So that's 23%. So those that are seeing emotional disengagement are really the biggest representative of that 14%. So the good news here is that we are closing the gap, and I'll talk about the strategies that have been implemented in the past, and even some that have been implemented more recently. But what's important here is that what we are doing has seen results. We've moved from 39% to 42%, even though that's not where we want to be at 50%. What we're doing is moving the needle, and that's the good news. What we see represented, as you can imagine from looking at our last slide, those that that are represented in those that are emotionally disengaged, that's emotional engagement is moving more slowly. We aren't seeing the same levels of growth in emotional engagement, and again, that is a pretty significant factor in the results that we see here as well. So then the question becomes, well, what are we doing? So we've outlined a few different bullet points for those strategies that are being utilized already and have been implemented or are in the process of for behavioral and emotional. Resource allocation has been shifted for additional counselors at the high school level. At the elementary level, we have doubled our guidance lessons, and that has been recent. So the additional counselor at the high school was instituted a few years ago through ESSER funding, but that hasn't always been funded because we haven't always been able to find that position. So it's been a little bit inconsistent, but the commitment has been there from a resource allocation standpoint. Doubling counseling guidance lessons, that is specifically related to the board's decision last year to add that additional FTE of specialists, which allowed us to provide more schedule flexibility, which provided more common prep time for elementary teachers. Another way that we did that was by increasing the number of guidance lessons. And so another benefit that came from that schedule shift. For the last few years, we have contracted with the village. That contract will actually come up again in our next board meeting. And my recommendation will be to continue the village family services or the mental health counseling through the village. And that's all been funded through grant funding thus far. But we'll be able to, you'll be able to see that contract, and I have statistics in my superintendent report that correspond directly to this as well. We have done a lot of work as it relates to MTSSB, so I don't want to throw the alphabet soup at you. Multi-tiered system of supports in behavior. So MTSSB, multi-tiered system of supports for behavior. So we have been training schools in the past in MTSSB. We're getting more schools trained this year, and 3 schools moving on to what we call level 2 for MTSSB training. Our schools have been more purposeful, or our teams have been more purposeful in meeting and setting goals for MTSSB, and they track that progress based on the BOQ, so that's a benchmarks of quality. Our middle school has provided more training for staff on a curriculum called 7 Mindsets. Our counseling staff has been trained in restorative practices, so when our students, because they are students, and when they make mistakes, how do we help them to learn from their mistakes, and how do we help them to right the situation? And so that's part of some problem-solving techniques. Our student summits, we've had 3, correct, Mr. Gaylor? 3 since the spring of 2023. And those focus of those student summits is bringing our high school students together, make sure that they have opportunity to provide student voice in decision-making. We train and support them in cultivating their student leadership, and we reinforce, as is written all over our strategic plan, how do we support belonging for all kids, that all kids see themselves in Jamestown Public Schools, and reinforce the importance of belonging for all students. So that's a lot of what we are doing, but we know that there's more that needs to be done, specifically in our students that are feeling disengaged from school. And so there's more that we need to do there to remove barriers, to analyze and address any unmet needs, and be consistent in terms of accountability, that all of those expectations are being managed consistently so our students know what to expect. As it relates to cognitive engagement, that you'll see represented in a lot of different areas, and Mr. Gaylor will talk about that more, but ensuring a guaranteed and viable curriculum. We do that through PLCs, through SBL. Incorporation of literacy and writing strategies. So in the last few years, we have written and received 2 pretty significant grants. It's about $2.5 million, the one Striving Readers grant, and then the Comprehensive State Literacy Development, Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, closed. And along with the enhancement of instructional coaches, literacy and writing strategies, specifically Steve Dunn, and other literacy strategies that have come, I think have had significant positive implications that are directly related to this. I think we will see significant benefit to assessments and what we see our students able to do through that commitment to those to those literacy strategies and writing strategies. I have seen that anecdotally as I look at students and what they're able to write, for example, is head and shoulders different than what it was before both of these two grants and the district's commitment to Steve-done writing strategies. Future goals related around enhancing work-based learning in CTE and community integration and personalized learning, as well as something that Mr. Gaylor will talk a little bit more about, but how are we doing in our Core Plus More strategies? What more do we need to be doing there? And I think you'll see that there is more that we want to do with Core Plus More. So some of the challenges that we see and next steps, our DSIC committee, so our District School Improvement Committee, has been a lot more purposeful at looking at our engagement data, and then so looking at that data, disaggregating what does that mean at the building level, how can we strategize at the building level around how to improve that. And so that's something that they've been working on, and that's really happened in the last year to be a little bit more purposeful about using that data. And in general, this is just my own belief, but I think this goal, Engagement and Learning Goal 1, is a great barometer of success. As our students are engaged, you will see representation in achievement scores. Those are a byproduct of improved engagement. So as we move the bar in engagement, you are going to see, and I think you are going to see improvements in those other areas. I think it's a natural byproduct, and so a resource allocation to all of those engagement strategies is I think, really very critical, because you will see positive impact. So with that, maybe I would stand for questions in this progress monitoring, or any flavor to add?
No, just to reiterate that these are all district level pieces of data. The
Thank you.
building levels really dive into that building level data, because
Thank you.
they would be able to have a little bit more fine perception of if there's a big swing in one category, what might be causing that, or if there's a success that they can then share across the other building levels as well.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions or questions?
Dan?
So the last data point that we took was in January of this year, and the previous one was January of the year before? Correct. Okay.
Correct. So we're reporting on the previous year, and so that, we have strategies even that have been implemented since January that aren't necessarily going to be represented. And I do believe that you will see these continue an upward trend just based on what we've done in the strategies that have been implemented thus far. But I think it's important to look at the reality of where we are and where we want to go.
Also, you'll notice we saw the biggest dip the post-COVID year, and so we're, along with the state average being reduced at that time, we were trending up before that, and then had that dip, and now we're trending up again.
Any other questions? Mr. Gaylor, you want to continue on with your Growth and Learning Goal 1?
So this is one of 4 goals, obviously measuring growth and learning, and we want to focus on what we would imagine a healthy picture of a school system would look like when you go to MTSS trainings, multi-tiered systems of support trainings. A healthy system is really reflective of 80% of students getting what they need in a core experience, 15% of students getting what they need in a core experience and some additional supports, and then around 5% of students will need a replacement core or an experience that is not on grade level, but is preparing them or propelling them towards grade level. So that's sort of the overall metric. As you'll see as we start to dissect this a little bit more, that model and our thinking about that model has also changed. And so it presents some challenges in measuring it over time, but we're definitely taking the right steps to improve the overall health of our system.
I was just going to add, and this might be one of those goals that as we annually review, this goal may change as that, as our systems change, especially around standards-based learning, that this might be a goal that looks a little bit different Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll be able to be more surgical and specific about reporting on, by a student by skill level rather than categorically. So one of the things that is represented in this first slide would just be where we were at last year. So that's kind of a reference for last year's performance. As we get into the slides, looking at elementary specifically, you can see that the percentage of students being served in core increased quite a bit. Core plus more actually reduced, and then ELA replacement core reduced. So in English language arts, you're looking at an increase in the amount of students receiving instruction at the core. That has to do with intentional scheduling. It has to do with Title I services pushing into classrooms more than they were in the past, and so they're pushing in and supporting students rather than taking them out of a core experience. And also has to do with special ed serving those replacement cores and really working hard to identify which students need a core experience plus more and which students need that replacement core. It wouldn't surprise you, but in some previous models that we've used, if a student doesn't get a core experience at grade level, or at least a portion of their experience at that core level, that they have a larger hill to climb the next year. They can possibly slide back without that core level experience, and so that's why that shift in model has reflected that. In math, similar situation, more pushing in with Title I services and supporting students in the core. The core plus more services for math at the elementary level are less than we would like to see, and that's because we haven't identified the specific programs that will support that differentiation in the classroom to the same degree, but we also have students that are achieving well in most of the elementary grades in math. When we look at our middle school, this year they had some additional students that qualified for Read 180, and we added Read 180 as an intervention in 6th and 7th grade, so it sort of changed their footprint based on a programmatic shift there as well. We feel like that's an adaptive resource. It's designed to specifically accelerate those students, and so while there's additional students in the replacement core for ELA at the middle level, and you can see the corresponding reduction in core, we feel that that program will support that. It's still a core level program. It still it's not the same core experience that other students are getting, but it's on some on-grade level standards, and it's adaptive to what their needs are. And so that additional adaptive piece will support them in higher levels of achievement and getting more students when they transition into high school into a core experience. Math core plus more does not exist at the middle level, other than our great teachers who are constantly differentiating for our students and providing additional supports. That is a gap in our system, is defining what is the core experience plus more that is needed. And we have seen a slight increase in the amount of students at the middle level requiring math replacement core. Middle school is sort of where it gets harder to separate so what we did is defined as on-grade level courses are considered core. So a student might be taking Algebra 1 as an 8th grader. They also might take 8th grade math. We define both of those as a core experience. One actually exceeds their core grade level, and the other is on grade level. Similarly, you have to think about that math becomes to be a little bit divided by course when you get to the high school level, and that division also starts in 7th and 8th grade for us in math, and so those replacement core classes are not on grade level, and that you see that is above what we would want to see in a healthy system, above 5% of students. When it comes to the high school achievement percentages, you can see an addition of students in the core, a reduction in core plus more for ELA, and a reduction in replacement core. So here again in ELA, we're defining that by course enrollment. And so those course enrollments are recommended from teachers and data, and there is some student election into which courses they take, particularly as they get older. And so you can see that there's an element of choice in that isn't within our control all the time. So if a student chooses to take a course like consumer math for their third math credit in the high school, we would consider that a course that's not on grade level or not part of the track towards Algebra 2. And so a student could choose that for their third math credit instead of taking probability statistics or Algebra 2. They would choose to take that. So we still define that as not on grade level. Is it their readiness or their career path or their some other individual prerogative that makes them choose that? We still want to reflect that that's not on grade level or not on, it might be aligned with their path, but it may not be aligned with what their ability is necessarily.
And just to add another point to that, you know, Mr. Gaylor talked about choice, and it is, but along the way we have counselors and advisors that help to define the path and to provide where those students would be best served based on where they're looking to go, what their goals are, and where their aptitude is. And so there are supports along the way to help students make those choices.
All right. So just overall, you see additional students involved in core at elementary, reduction in the replacement core programs at elementary, middle school, and expansion of those intensive interventions, and then high school, a reduction in the ELA replacement core and more students selecting that replacement core for mathematics. So that's kind of an overall picture. When you think of the strategies that we're utilizing, you can see that a lot of these were replicated in student engagement. And as Dr. Leck said, student engagement reflects a lot of the other strategic goals that we have. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, and I don't want to do a workshop on the professional learning community process or on standards-based learning, but I'll tell you that where we're headed is to be more surgical with interventions. Interventions used to be categorical and moving students by groupings into what's easy to schedule and where we need to get and where we're going to get over time with additional tools and technology and understanding of our standards is to be more nimble and responsive to the student needs that week by that skill. So a student doesn't leave second grade without a set of core skills that is necessary for third grade and then third into fourth, because teachers are asking that question constantly. Which students have learned this and need to move on to something even more, and which students haven't learned it yet, and how are we going to respond to meet their needs? And we believe that that lives best at the classroom and team level, and that our collaboration is going to produce those better results. But we have to have a common definition of what that standard is that we're moving towards. So that's a quick way to say that this metric is important in reflecting an overall health of the system, but we feel like it's going to be more difficult to determine because we're getting more surgical and responsive with our model over time. So with that, I want to keep us on track for that, but anything to add on?
No, I don't believe so. I think maybe stand for questions if.
Yeah.
Oh, did you want to talk?
Aaron,
Yeah.
go ahead. And Jason.
I'll provide some color commentary.
Okay.
So this one here, being on the strategic plan committee, actually had a little bit of discussion on it, on, you know, why these levels are at where they're at. When I walked into it, I was saying, well, hey, the goal should be getting everybody 100% in core, right? And everyone is at that optimum level. Well, that's not really a true statement, in recognition that not all kids learn the same. So that was like an aha moment. It was like, well, yeah, that's right. Don't forget that some kids learn different than other kids. And this model takes that into account and pushes it towards levels within the categories of what is, I guess, historically been shown as a good fit, where we should strive to. If we're at those levels, it's unrealistic to expect us to, you know, have everybody learn the same. So that was kind of an aha moment in developing that, and you know, trying to set these limits. So, and then also recognizing that this one here is one of the driver metrics that, you know, it's pushing our ability to achieve our proficiency goals as a results metric for the district. So if we're seeing something lagging in here, it'll show us that, you know, we might have difficulties in achieving our proficiency metrics because there's a lot of interventions going on and the kids aren't at the levels that they should be. So.
Yep, and just to build on that point, if a student doesn't have a core experience, but their third grade North Dakota State assessment is on grade level, how do you think they'll fare in that assessment? So that's the reason to push for a core experience plus additional supports to meet their needs.
Jason?
Just to clarify, and I think you answered, but the core plus more and the core replacements are the interventions. There's no more interventions. Is that correct?
The replacement core would be an intervention in a separate setting, or pulled out of a experience in a classroom for that. But the core plus more is in the classroom for the core experience, and then some additional. If it's a pull out or a small group, it could be right within that classroom, or it could be a shorter time frame that's more specific to what that student needs.
Go ahead, Jason.
And is this flowing into our special ed programming? What does that look the same?
So they have definitions categorically, and then the purpose of special ed is to work on specifically designed instruction. And so a student qualifies for special ed because they need some specific instruction just in their disability. And so they're getting much better. They've gotten quite a bit of training, and Mrs. Bedeau has been implementing a product called Goal Book that helps them be more surgical and responsive to what those needs are as well. So there's some neat tools that are out there and are early in the process, and we're a district that's out there and trying those tools.
Any other questions from the board?
And if anybody has any other feedback on how they would like to see these results presented, we're an open book as far as.
Yeah, so we're learning on how the best way is to provide this data and progress monitor. So if you do have feedback, you know, this was our first attempt at doing these. So if you have different ways that you'd like to see that, or other information that you'd like to see, just let us know.
I'm just going to bounce off Aaron there. Your comments were accurate, and I think we had a lot of really good discussion on metrics and measures and how we're going to structure that, and you know, and Jamie also, and I think we have some fairly aggressive goals and over the 5-year plan here, and so I'm interested in hearing you provided some specifics on some directions that we're going with more individualized planning and those kinds of things to help us get to where we need to be. So I appreciate everyone's work on this, so thank you very much.
Just have a motion to accept the
Yep.
progress monitoring report.
Is there a motion?
To accept the progress monitoring report.
Motion by Melissa to accept the report. Is there a second? Second by Owen. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Leck.
You have the written report there, and I will walk through that as well. Excuse me. Let me get to the top here. You did have, you'll have a personnel recommendation coming from Mrs. Blumenschein, who has worked in the district previously. This is a partial contract to replace Mrs. Thompson. We had a, part of a partial, and then now this would be another partial to help support that that loss of the full-time FTE designed to be, hopefully a temporary fix to that loss, and this is still funded through the CLSD grant. So change orders, you'll be acting on those later. One of the new things that we opted to do based on this was a Google spreadsheet that helps to track what those change orders are, and then the cost and how that impacts our contingency balance. So you can see that reflected there. So it is a significant, these three change orders, one in particular, represents a fairly large portion of that contingency, but we feel that that's still a project that is on track, and that contingency balance remains to be enough. The school compliance reports, this is also an agenda item that you'll act on as a board. I just shared the process. This used to be part of accreditation in the past. We would get a school accreditation sometime around the end of the school year, and we had a report that came, and we were accredited to exist as a school sometime in May of the school year. So they changed that process now to one of assurances, and essentially each school reviews assurances in licensure, personnel, curriculum, continuous improvement, safety requirements, background checks, transcripts, and compliance. And so each of our schools have gone through those assurances and submitted those assurances. So it is now the board's job to accept those, approve those assurances, so we as a district then can submit our LEA compliance report. So our local education association's compliance report for our district. What I am suggesting to you or recommending to you is that all of our schools meet those assurances. You can see those linked into the report, what has been reported. So we meet all of those assurances, and so you would act to approve those and allow me to submit the LEA. I've talked a lot about Vital. In our partnership with Vital, I will say that they continue to be very, very responsive. I've asked a lot of them, to be completely honest. It seems like I'm asking them for something all the time, but they've been very responsive. One of the things we asked for was a planning guide that we felt could not only benefit our district, but other districts that they partner with. They responded with what I feel is a very good planning tool, and so I've filled out that information and shared it with you so you understand what that partnership looks like for us as a district. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there were. I have provided a link to the address that I provided, the superintendent's address, the in-service. The focus was our role in public education, our approach to educating a vast range of perspectives, affirming how important it is to us to continue to work with Vital and build our working and learning environment. We looked at our strategic plan at a quite in-depth level, and then we also had discussion on the current reality with enrollment and facility needs. It was a shortened version of what we talked about at a board retreat in June. Policy DDAE, there is a parental leave policy that the district passed 2 years ago. Since that time, and essentially what it provided was for those birthing parents, provided 20 days of paid leave that are separate from their sick leave. And since that time, we've had 16 eligible staff that have utilized this additional leave with very limited number of unpaid leave. That leave has been I believe the case is one instance of one day of unpaid leave by these 16 individuals in the last 2 years, and I think that shows that the policy was necessary. We know from the conversations we had in the past that 36% of those taking what we used to call maternity leave, now we call birthing parent leave, 36% of that was taken was unpaid time. We wanted to bridge that gap, and I think we have bridged that gap with policy DDAE. However, what I wanted to look at is, is that still, and of course the answer is always sure, let's have more, right? Who wouldn't want more? But I'm looking at, is there adequacy not just in the leave, but what happens after? So there is need for medical leave for self, for child. And what I get concerned about is, are we asking those individuals to continue to walk that tightrope between medical leave, available leave? And I'm just curious. And so I asked for HR to pull together a group of those, that 16 people that have accessed that leave, and I just want to know what experiences are they having. I think we know the answer to was the leave appropriate for that specific period of time? I think the answer to that is likely yes. Like I said, would anybody say, no, please don't give me more leave? No, of course they would say, yes, give me more. But is it adequate for that period of time? But also, what's the outcome after that? Is there a need for more support so they have more aftercare support? And so I'm just asking the question. And so I'm just bringing those people together. Our logic at the time was to target 6 weeks of paid leave. If you look at the amount of annual leave that's given, it's either 10 or 15, depending on where they're at in their career. They're either getting 10 sick leave days or 15. But with that 20 days, so those 4 weeks plus 10 days, that gets people to 6 weeks. One of the areas that I've thought about in the last 2 years since we've done this, which I think has been a great thing, but if we have those that have C-sections, 6 weeks isn't enough. That standard is 8 weeks. So is there more that we need to do for the care at the time, but also care after? And so I'm just making the board aware that I'm having these conversations with staff. I feel really good about what we've done as a district in this area, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be examining it and determining, was it the right decision to make, and is it adequate in all areas? And so if there's any updates from that conversation, we'll certainly apprise the board, but I just wanted to make the board aware. I referenced earlier our school-based mental health services. That's a partnership through the village. A little history. We started that as a 3-day agreement. We were thinking, let's have services at each level 1 day a week. One day K through 5, 1 day 6 through 8, 1 day 9 through 12. We really quickly found like that wasn't enough. And so the board wisely over time increased that from 3 days to 5 days. This has been really well received. There's still a waiting list, but we are managing to support a lot of families and students throughout this. And one thing that I think we don't talk enough about is those services continue throughout the summer. We're seeing students all summer long that we're still providing services to, and they come for those summer services. They come to the middle school, but otherwise they're supported in school during the school year. And the majority of families do take advantage of those summer sessions. So how many is that? That's 61 individual students and almost 1,200 sessions that take place. And they create goals. Each of those individual students create goals, and we have a reported goal achievement of 76% of their individual goals are met or partially met. So the funding for this has been through our behavioral health grant. So the general fund isn't seeing that directly. That is funded for us, and that's a support through them, and that's $65,000. And that will be the annual contract amount that will come before the board with a recommendation for approval. That will be coming to the board as well. And we've already talked a lot about initiated measure 4, progress monitoring. You'll have a cooperative agreement in place for Victory Christian School, and that is consistent with the St. John's Academy agreements that are already in place. And the spotlight that I wanted to bring up this month, or this meeting, is our Jamestown Public Schools Elementary Leadership Team. We call them the ELT. They were established a few years ago, and they have revised a little bit their purpose, reconnected more with the goals of the district with the ELT. And I'll tell you, that is one hard working group. And I've outlined the individuals that are all in the 23-24 ELT leaders. I've listed their names there, but they have given very generously of their time and done an awful lot of work as we support pretty aggressive initiatives. They have been the real workhorses to a lot of the work that needs to get done, and they have provided an awful lot of work and support for our districts, and so I wanted to honor them as well with the work that they've done with planning, PD, our cybersecurity integration, planning, scheduling, program changes, curricular changes, standards-based learning. It's, the work that they've done has been irreplaceable, so I want to give a big shout out to our ELT team as well. But with that, I would stand for questions.
Melissa?
And I guess I could have waited till we get to that, the cooperative agreement to ask the question, but I'll ask it now. Just remind me, when we do those cooperative agreements, those students still pay the activity fees and everything?
Correct.
Yep. Just like our
Correct.
regular students?
We just have an agreement with them to provide the
Okay.
option to participate.
Do we get any foundation aid payment
No.
for that at all if they're
No,
participating? in
not
the
for
school?
extracurriculars, no.
Okay. Jamie?
Do you know what the wait time for the village mental health services is?
It really depends on goal achievement, and we prioritize those that have the most immediate need, and I think we could expand services by the couple day equivalents and still see some needs, and still see a wait list, but we also have to have providers that are available, and right now we are at the amount that we can get through the village is the equivalent of the 5 days. But so I guess to answer your question, it just depends. I don't know how long the wait list is at every building or at every level, but it depends on which students have worked their way through the system.
So to my understanding, we would, where do I want to go with this? Would there be an additional supports that we could supply to students outside of the village, like another company, or is it just solely because we're lacking providers anywhere?
Yeah, I think providers is going to be a big hurdle, is a pretty big barrier. I'm surprised that the village has been able to provide 5 days. And they do that through a mix and match of providers that they help us with. We have done other things as well with our existing counselors in enhancing some guidance opportunities, the restorative practices that I referenced earlier. But it would be great to have more time. And I think if you talk to our building principals, they'd say the same. We would love to see a wait list of 0 if we can make that happen.
Any other? Jason?
On the mental or the village note, we're still providing those opportunities to staff too, correct?
Well, we do have an employee assistance program that is also through the village. It is a separate agreement. It's not part of this, but we do provide those services, yeah.
Yes, I agree. If we could find a way to eliminate any waiting list, that would be so. And I know that the village, I'm sure, is aware of our interest in increasing access. So we'll continue to work in that area. Any other questions from the board? Any other questions? Okay. If not, moving on in our agenda, nothing under old business. Under new business, under activities, approval of cooperative agreement with Victory Lutheran School, number 1, middle school boys basketball, number 2, middle school girls wrestling. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of the cooperative agreement with Victory Lutheran School.
That was my fault.
Yep, sorry, yep, Christian school, middle school boys basketball and middle school girls wrestling. And as noted in your report, there's no increased cost at this time for us with additional coaching or anything like that. So, okay. Any other discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Buildings and grounds. A, approval to advertise bids on the JVCTC project. Is there a motion? Motion to approve, Aaron, second by Steve. Motion and second, approval to advertise bids on the JVCTC project. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of JVCTC change orders, and we can do these all at one time if the board wishes. Change order 1 is temperature control systems, 2 is doors, and number 3 is pin and locks.
It's actually a credit back.
Credit back for pin and locks. That's what I was reading that. So if the board wishes, we can do them all at once. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron to approve 1 through 3. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of the JVCTC change orders 1 through 3. Any discussion? Melissa.
Just had a question on, we were going to be using doors and they wanted them to be left swinging. Is it because they were going to be running into something, or just a preference, or why are we spending an extra $1,000 on doors?
Mr. Gaylor.
That was after consulting with our CTC childcare teacher. The preference was to change that because of the flow of students and children. It was going to be safer to have them designed that way. So it had to do with some bathroom locations that were switched.
For safety. Okay. Good question, Melissa. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. Approval of the JVCTC change orders 1 through 3. Any other discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 3, curriculum assessment instruction, nothing under that, or under finance, review of certificates of deposit. Christy, would you like to share any information or comments?
I just thought it would be helpful for you to see all the investments that we had and when they come due. Next meeting, I'll have a recommendation for the second CD that will be coming due in September.
All right. Any questions from the board? And feel free to contact Christy anytime if you have questions. Moving on to under operations, A, approval of the school compliance reports and approval to submit the LEA compliance report. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve. Is there a second? Second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second for approval of the school compliance reports and approval to submit the LEA compliance report. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. 6, personnel. Approval to hire for the 2024 to 2025 school year upon a successful background check and appropriate licensure. Caroline Blumenshine. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, second. Second by Owen. Motion and second for approval to hire for the 2024 to 2025 school year upon a successful background check and appropriate licensure. Caroline Blumenshine. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Thank you, Caroline. Policy and procedures, approval of revision of the policy DDDB-AR. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval revision of policy DDDB-AR. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. 8, under tuition, we have approval of the 2024 to 2025 tuition agreements, with number 1 through 5, 1 pre-K to attend Montpelier, 2 fifth grade attend Montpelier, 9th grade student to attend Montpelier, 8th grade student to attend Medina, and 9th grade student to attend Medina. Is there, and we can do them all at once if you'd like, is there a motion? For all of them, Melissa? Motion to approve 1 through 5. Is there a second? Second by Jason. We have motion and a second for approval of 2024 to 2025 tuition agreements 1 through 5. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under other. Items for future agenda. Does the board have any items for future agenda? Jamie.
Maybe not next meeting since it'll be fairly lengthy, but we should maybe plan a group photo for our website.
Oh, good idea. Good idea. We will.
Dress up again.
We will get the information out enough in advance so you can plan for it. So, yep, great idea, Jamie. Thank you. Any other items? At any time, if you have an item, please let Dr. Leck or myself know. Under meetings to be scheduled, we have the Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, September 9th at 3:45 in the District Office Conference Room. Our next school board member meeting is Monday, September 16th at 5:30 in the Thompson Community Room. And then at that meeting, we'll start the regular meeting at 5:30. And then at 6 o'clock, we will take a recess of the regular meeting to hold our budget hearing at 6 p.m. So any community that wants to come to the budget hearing, it is going to be at 6 p.m. in this Thompson Community Room. Once we complete the budget hearing, we'll resume and finish the meeting. Any finance or anything else scheduled this week or next week? Okay, before the 16th.
Facilities this week.
Facilities, yep, I was thinking there was another one. Yep, so facilities meeting is going to be this week at 4:30 in the conference room, so, okay. Anything else? Okay. Your monthly superintendent evaluation is Section 3, Human Resource Management, and Section 5, Community Relations. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.